Let's bring in the great broadcaster from Macquarie Media and, of course, Sky News, Alan Jones, joining us live from London. Great to talk to you, Alan. This is truly a watershed election result.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, my pleasure. I spoke to Deb Knight on Macquarie Radio on Wednesday, and I told her that she had as much chance as Jeremy Corbyn of being Prime Minister. I can't believe these people. We had it in the Australian election. We had it in the American election, that we've got these pollsters who purport to know everything. We've got the so-called experts. I heard Alexander Downer on this station 2 nights ago talking about hung parliaments. It was never, ever going to be. There is no support for Jeremy Corbyn. This is a complete landslide. It is the worst result for Labor since 1935, when their then leader, Ramsay MacDonald, actually lost his seat. It is a worse result than 1983, and everyone thought Michael Foot was a hopeless left-winger, and Margaret Thatcher thrashed him. It's a worse result since 1983. The Labor Party, I'm not too sure they can even rebuild from here. And Boris Johnson just made it quite clear. I mean, he articulated the case. The biggest thing here was Brexit. People are sick and tired of it over here. And at the end of the day, he said, well, vote for me, vote me in, and Brexit will be off the agenda. We'll get it done. The other bloke was saying, oh, well, I'll do a deal with the EU. I'm not sure what the deal will be, and I won't tell you. Then when we get a deal done, we'll go to a referendum. I'm not sure what side I'll be voting for in the referendum. The whole of his front bench were Remainers. I mean, there's some hellish results here. I said a couple of days ago, Chris, that if you had looked at the northeast of England, which is, I suppose, on the British political map, 2 o'clock up there, and that was where the heartland of Labor, but the heartland of Leave. And I mentioned seats like Workington. Now, Workington's been Labor for 100 years. 1918, the seat came into being. It has been won by the Conservatives. You take seats like Blythe Valley, they've been Labor since 1935. You take Bolsover, which Dennis Skinner has held since 1950, when the seat came into being. Dennis Skinner's 88. That went to the Conservatives. You've got seats like Darlington, which are blue ribbon Labor, went to the Conservatives. This has been a complete wipeout. And I might add that there has been quite a significant result. And Nicola Sturgeon will carry on about Scotland. They actually won more seats than I thought. But what has to be remembered, she now wants another referendum in Scotland to break away from the United Kingdom. But the total UK vote in Scotland is 3.9%. So it's not going to be something that will worry Boris too much. But the Labor Party, I have no idea where they go. The Liberal Democrats lost their leader, Swinson. She was the most unpopular leader, even more unpopular than Jeremy Corbyn. So she lost her seat. The one Conservative seat that was lost was in Richmond, which is out near Wimbledon. And that was Zach Goldsmith. I mean, he's the richest man in the Parliament. But he only held the seat by 45 votes, and the Lib Dems went after him, and they got him. But all those people who refused to support Theresa May, and Boris got rid of them in the Conservative Party, and they stood as independents, people like Dominic Grieve and others, and Anne Soubry, they all lost their seats. So it's been a complete clean out of the Labor Party, of the Conservative Party, but there's no one left in the Labor Party. Yeah, I'll come back to the Labor Party in a minute, Alan, but I agree with you. Obviously, the substance of this message, the substance of what the Conservatives were offering was core, because they were going to deliver on the Brexit that the population had already voted to see. But I thought Boris Johnson really captured the spirit of the campaign with his simple message of let's get it done. He just encapsulated the frustration of the mainstream voters. Yes, yeah, they were fed up. Look, there is a flip side to this, of course, and that is almost beyond belief. Corbyn was promising an increase in expenditure in his first year of $88 billion, an increase in infrastructure spending in his first year of $55 billion, a national reconstruction fund, he didn't say what that was about, of $400 billion. He was going to renationalise everything. The government was going to buy back the buses, the trains, water, broadband, energy, the whole box of dice for hundreds of billions of dollars. He was going to take the top 350 companies on the ASX and appropriate to the government 10% of their shares. He was going to increase corporate tax, which the Conservatives had reduced from 26% to 18%. He was going to raise that to 28%. This was just mind-blowing. And, of course, the headlines here every day were saying, well, there'll be no England, capital will go, there'll be no jobs and so on. So there were two aspects to the Conservative attack on Corbyn. It's a miracle that Corbyn's still the leader today. I mean, I would have thought the bloke would have resigned last night. But the left are fighting like hell for control of the Labor Party. They're not. There's no lesson to the left here.
Well, the idea
they are determined to take control of the party, and that being the case,
Corbyn is saying that he should lead the sort of examination, the post-election policy examination. That would be madness. I agree with you. He should get out of the way straight away. But as you say, the country dodged a bullet with those incredibly extreme policies Corbyn was promising. We've seen already, of course, the pound is up, the market's up around the world, and Donald Trump talking about a very generous free trade deal.
Yeah, and the taxi driver this morning coming here was so excited. I voted blue, he said. But look, I spoke to a senior, very, very senior Labor frontbencher on 2 days ago, actually. And he said, Jeremy Corbyn, I said, well, what do you make of this bloke? Well, he said, no one knows him. He doesn't talk to anyone in the party. But he said, I'll tell you something about Jeremy Corbyn. He has voted more times against the Labor Party than the Conservatives have. He said, he's been the biggest thorn in the Labor Party side. And he said, I've resigned. He actually resigned from the Labor Party and decided not to contest his seat. And someone said to him, well, was that difficult after 40 years? He said, no, not at all. I just resigned from a party which was no longer the party I joined. And that's what so many people, I think, in the Labor Party feel. But how they rebuild from here, I've got no idea.
It will be extraordinary to watch, but what is going to be more immediate is a Christmas with certainty and optimism in London and the rest of the UK.
Well, Chris, I must say this, that Boris does have some real problems on his hands. Once he pulls out of the EU, and of course he's got this transitional period which goes till the end of 2020. In other words, he's effectively out of the European Union, but Britain is still governed by certain rules of the Union. Nonetheless, in renegotiating deals which will be beneficial to manufacturing and to the automobile industry and the chemical industry and so on, there are very, very real concerns amongst those aspects of British business as to whether they'll be able to get deals which are appropriate or equivalent to those that they enjoy now. Now, as you know, tariffs and all the rest of it enter into it. This is not unlike the last election in winter, by the way, in 1923, because in 1923 the big issue then wasn't Brexit. The big issue after Bonar Law died and Baldwin became the leader and Ramsay MacDonald was the Labor leader, Baldwin decided the way to regenerate the economy after World War II was to impose tariffs. And he thought that would assist British industry and British business and British employment. Baldwin and Asquith opposed. Ramsay MacDonald and Asquith opposed. And Baldwin got smashed in the election. Now, subsequently, the coalition between the Liberals and Labor broke up and Baldwin was returned handsomely to government. So that was the last winter election in 1923. And we've had a similar set of circumstances now. The Brexit then were tariffs. It's not an unimportant component of the Brexit debate today.
Yes, Boris Johnson's got a big challenge ahead to deliver this smoothly. Let's just go back to Australian politics, Alan. I wonder if you've kept an eye on what's been happening here, this inane climate debate we're having here, and even the New South Wales Coalition Environment Minister, Matt Kean, has blamed the bushfires on climate change and announced a sweep of new emissions reductions policies.
Well, look, I don't want to be unkind to Matt, but he wouldn't have a clue. Simple as that. And I think he's put his whole political career at risk. This is just infantile stuff. For a start, you can't have a fire without fuel. And we've got a real problem about burnbacks. And 11% of Australia are national parks. The national parks are locked. The fire trails are locked. You can't get in. And he's the Environment Minister. What's he done about burnbacks? Nothing. And so there's a veritable inferno out there waiting. Then, of course, there are 50% of these fires have been lit by arsonists. That's an enormous factor in all of this. And as for climate, and Scott Morrison's brought this argument as well. I mean, it's not believable. I mean, at the end of the day, apparently carbon dioxide is a problem. That's why we can't have coal-fired power, apparently. Carbon dioxide's coming out of my mouth now. It's the source of all plant life. And the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in the world is 0.04%. human beings around the world, that is manufacturing, living, cows, animals when they break wind and so on, is 3%. And tiny little Australia down here is 1.3% of 3% of 0.04%. Now, someone in grade 5 could tell you that doesn't sort of add up. But what does Matt KEAN do? He listens to the bureaucrats. They're all the left-wing bureaucrats, and they're all part of all of this. And they can't define what climate change is. If it is carbon dioxide, well, tell us why carbon dioxide's a problem. How much of it is there? And what's it doing to the climate? And they can't justify it. So they come out with this excuse to obscure the fact that they've done nothing about backburning in our national parks, which Bob Carr locked off, and that's the source of the problem.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, Chris, when you've got 11% of the nation locked up, my word, locked up national parks, it could be worse. These aren't the worst bushfires ever, I might add. They're dreadful, but they're not the worst ever. But, of course, we also had someone arguing that drought was a consequence of climate change. You know, at the end of the day, the drought and the bushfires are so bad, the Prime Minister should declare a national emergency. The Army and everyone should be brought in, and all the nation's resources should be applied to both of them. Why he won't do that, I've got no idea. But for many people out there, it's a really rough Christmas when they feel abandoned by their national government.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alan Jones. I really appreciate it. Alan Jones there, live from London, on the scene of this historic election where Boris Johnson has been returned with a huge majority.